This episode contains descriptions of violence against a child and will not be suitable for all listeners. Welcome to Crime and Sacrifice. My name is Brianna, and this is episode 9, Temar and Chris. On July 11, 2013, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, Jocelyn Rojas was outside of her grandma's apartment building playing. Her mother, Jamie, was inside, but was checking up on her daughter periodically through the window. At around 4 p.m., Jocelyn disappeared from her mother's view around the side of the building. A few minutes later, her mom went to go look for her, worried because she could no longer see her. She went around the same corner that her daughter had disappeared from, but couldn't find her. More worrying still, her daughter's prized bicycle was left at the bike rack, along with a credit card that Jocelyn had been playing with. It was then that her mother began to panic, frantically making her way around the apartment complex and looking for her girl without success. Almost immediately, she called 911. Soon the scene was filled with neighbors enlisted to help, along with firefighters, police, and search dogs. There were at least 100 personnel and volunteers searching for Jocelyn, a photo of the young girl in hand as they went door to door looking. Police knew that in cases like this, time is not on your side. At around the same time, a group of teenagers was hanging out nearby. One of them was named Temar Boggs, a 15-year-old who was helping a neighbor move. When one of the volunteers approached, showing a picture of Jocelyn and asking if he had seen her, Temar hadn't, but he felt unsettled about it. A little while later, he and a friend, 13-year-old Chris Garcia, went by the block where Jocelyn lived to see how the search was progressing. It was now around 6:30 p.m., and there was still no sign of her. The two of them wanted to do something to help and joined one of the search parties, staying with the rest of the group for a while before Temar describes something clicking in him, a determination to find this little girl who so many people were out searching for. He asked to borrow a friend's bike, and then he and Chris set off apart from the rest of the group in a different direction. They weren't sure exactly what they were looking for, but followed their intuition and kept their eyes peeled for anything out of the ordinary. It wasn't long before they spotted a blue car whose driver seemed lost. The car was moving slowly, directionless. Temar and Chris recognized it as out of place and began following it at a distance. When the car got to the top of a hill and spotted police up the road, it made a quick K-turn. The car was now heading toward them, and they were able to get a good look at those inside: an older, weathered-looking man in the driver's seat and a little girl with blonde hair and glasses in the passenger side. Temar and Chris knew that this was Jocelyn, that they had found her and that she was in danger. With that, the boys sped after the car on their bikes, weighing their options. They were athletic kids, but they were still just teenagers. This guy could have a weapon, could have used his car as one. But Tamar's main thought was how he could scare the driver enough into letting the girl go. He even considered jumping up onto the hood. They followed him for a full 15 minutes through winding suburban streets, before suddenly the driver seemed to have been spooked enough, scared of getting caught. The car pulled over as the passenger door opened and Jocelyn ran out, straight into the waiting arms of Temar, as the driver of the car sped away. Temar reported that she wasn't even crying, just said that she wanted to see her mom. Carefully, Temar carried the girl to police and rescue workers. At first, she didn't want to leave the teen's arms, but he assured her that they were okay, and soon Jocelyn was reunited with her family. Jamie, Jocelyn's mother, kissed the boys and called them heroes. Police questioned Jocelyn later on and learned what had happened, that tragically she had not come away from the experience without harm. They learned that she had been at her grandmother's apartment building, playing on her bike, when a car drove up and a man opened the door. He struck up a conversation with Jocelyn about her bike, asking her to go with him eventually, saying that he would buy her an ice cream. Jocelyn could sense that there was something off about this man, but at her hesitation, he leaped out and grabbed her by the neck, forcing her quickly into his car. The man told her that he thought he was going to keep her before driving her to a secluded area and sexually assaulting her, threatening to kill her. It was afterwards that he was driving around, trying to decide what to do next, when Temar and Chris came upon him. And as many of us who are familiar with true crime know, many sexual predators will do whatever they can to avoid punishment for their actions. It is not an overstatement to say that Temar and Chris may have saved this little girl's life, and certainly saved her from additional trauma and fear. Temar was quoted by Lancaster Online as saying at the time, "I'm just a normal person who did a thing that anybody else would do." Temar and Chris also had a hand in helping police track down the perpetrator of this crime. They were able to provide an accurate description of Jocelyn's abductor, ultimately leading to police identifying him as 73-year-old Harold Leroy Kerr. Kerr, of course, had a record, convicted in 1989 of kidnapping and sexually assaulting another little girl. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison in that case, but was paroled in 1999, though returned to prison after it was found that he was in possession of inappropriate images of minors, and went back to prison to serve out the remainder of his sentence. He was released for good in 2010. The incident with Jocelyn took place 3 years later. In the end, Harold Kerr pled guilty to 2 counts of sexual assault, kidnapping, and failing to register as a sex offender. In court before sentencing, Jocelyn herself had the courage to make a statement to the judge, asking the court to stop Hare from ever taking any other kids. Jocelyn's family also made statements, her mother talking about finding a way to forgive herself from the guilt of not being able to protect her little girl. Jocelyn's father talking about how his daughter would never be the same, seemed fearful even around him in the immediate aftermath. The pain and lasting impact of this crime is not something the public will ever truly be able to understand. The judge for this case sentenced Harold Hare to 50 to 100 years in prison, ensuring that he will never be on the street again. As for Temar Boggs and Chris Garcia, the boys' story received national attention, and the community came together to donate $20,000 toward their education in an Indiegogo campaign. Temar was honored in Congress, a college fund set up in his name. And yet, a story like this, involving so many different lives, doesn't truly have an end. Temar and Chris were just teenagers at the time, still trying to figure out the course for their lives. Tamar's story, in particular, took a dark turn in the years following this incident. It's unclear exactly what happened in his life, but his dreams of playing sports professionally, working as a chef, or maybe designing sneakers didn't pan out after he graduated high school. Lancaster is a community with a high level of poverty, and I'm not sure what Tamar's life was like, the difficulties he faced. Roughly 3 years after the events of that July day, Temar committed an armed robbery at a Lancaster store. He and his accomplice left with just $200 for the crime, and Temar admitted to pointing a gun directly at the store clerk. He and the other robber were eventually caught, and Temar pled guilty to the crime. At sentencing, many members of the community showed up to vouch for Tamar's character, including Jocelyn's grandmother, who asked the judge for leniency. It doesn't seem to have made much of an impact, and Temar was sentenced to 40 months to 10 years in prison. This just goes to show that one great action does not mean your life or your character is settled. Every day we have to make choices that move us closer to one type of a person or another. And yesterday's hero can become tomorrow's villain if we try to simplify things like that. But it isn't simple. In Tamar's case, who is anybody to judge him? Does this crime diminish the very real goodness that is clearly a part of him? evident in the courage he showed to save this little girl. I think Tamar's story is important because it is so human and sums up the point of this podcast, that each of us has the potential for both good and bad. And at any given time, most of us get the chance to decide. Though his community's support didn't help Temar in sentencing, maybe it did help him in gaining parole. After being denied once, Temar was granted parole on August 27th of 2019, after 1.5 years in prison. It's up to Temar to determine the course of his life from here, though I don't pretend to know the struggles he'll face as a Black man in America, especially somebody with a felony conviction. I hope he gets the chance he deserves, and that he also has the support he'll need. As for Chris Garcia, it's actually difficult to find out how he's doing today, though maybe that's a good sign. That's it for this week. You can find the show notes for this and all episodes on our website at crimeandsacrifice.com. Thank you all for listening. What kind of person will you choose to be?